Welcome to Mental Issues with Brandebo. Today we have an expert in mental issues who is going to introduce himself. First of all, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Dr. Precious Makiyi. I'm a medical doctor with expert training in mental health, or rather maybe I would say postgraduate training in mental health. Some would say specialist or whatever term that you want to use, but yeah, I deal with mental health, especially of young people. I've been working with young people since around 2018. Oftentimes, most of my work has been around helping young people in terms of those who are going through different mental health issues, ranging from depression to anxiety to different personality disorders and so on and so forth. So basically, I provide psychotherapy, what others would call it as counseling. I'm also a mental health researcher. I do research because oftentimes in science we don't depend on what was happening in 1960s. Science keeps changing. So what would bring that change is through research. So I'm a mental health researcher, but also I do deal with not just young people, but also even older people, those who are working. We call that occupational mental health, the mental health in the workplace. So it's quite an interesting journey, and I'm sure that the listeners will benefit a lot through this podcast as I share my experiences with them.
Thank you so much for introducing yourself. Feel free as you are, and we're going to talk about different stuff. I'm going to ask you different questions, and I'm very happy that you are here today with me. But first of all, what is mental health all about?
It's an interesting question. Surprising, just today, this is the second time someone asking me about what is mental health. If we were to go by textbook definitions, according to the World Health Organization, they say that mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual is realize their potential, and individual is able to cope with the normal stresses of life. As they do that, eventually they are able to contribute to society. So this is all about mental health. Usually people confuse between mental health and mental disorders. So these are quite two different things, as the South is from the North, so they're quite different. When you talk of mental disorder, it means somebody has moved away from the order. So for instance, starting from the definition of mental health as stated by the WHO, the World Health Organization, maybe I'll talk of two key issues or three. Number one, a state of well-being in which an individual realizes their potential, meaning to say anything that would hinder an individual from realizing their full potential. It means it's a mental health issue. This is why we usually say that mental health is a cross-cutting issue. Mental health is not just, though the health is there, but mental health is not a health issue. It's a cross-cutting issue. It involves almost all the sectors, because you cannot talk of people enjoying a good mental health, realizing their potential, if let's say it's raining and they are sleeping in a house that is leaking. The environment is not conducive. They're exposed to cold. They're feeling cold. All those are mental health issues, because nobody can realize their potential. Let's say, for instance, a student in class, they cannot realize their potential when they're feeling cold, when the others are feeling warm, they're in class, they're learning. So anything that would hinder anybody from realizing their potential, that's a mental health issue. Then we also look at coping with the normal stresses of life. You know, in life we are all, one way or the other, exposed to stress, which is part of life. I mean, we cannot have a life free from stress. Then it means that's not living. The way God designed life, He made it that way, that we should have our ups and downs. But in that ups and downs, which are the normal stresses of life, one should be able to realize, you should be able to cope with the normal stresses of life. Mind you, I'm using the word normal because there are some stresses which it's part of life. But when it goes beyond what is expected as normal to you, then eventually it's also a mental health issue. Number one. Number two, if you're not able to cope with the normal stresses of life, it's also a mental health issue, because what that means is you are going to find, or one is going to find, negative ways to cope, which might include drugs, using substances. Some would even, different addictions that people would dwell into as part of trying to cope. So there are different ways through which people can cope. If one is practicing those good coping skills and they're able to realize their potential and they're working productively towards their community development, then we call that person is mentally stable. Now, the other thing that I would say is that, as I mentioned earlier on, to say there's a difference between mental health and mental disorder. Now, it's a disorder is whereby now somebody's mental health, it's in jeopardy, whereby let me mention of another definition and I'll combine this and talk about disorder. Another simple definition is when you say that somebody is having a good mental health, that somebody should have good thoughts or positive thoughts, should have good feelings or emotions, should have good actions or behaviors. Why did we talk about actions, feelings, thoughts? Because these three are interlocked. If somebody has negative thoughts, they will eventually have negative feelings or emotions. And if somebody has negative feelings or emotions, they will eventually have negative actions or behaviors. And it's like a cycle. Keeps going like that. Now, if we are saying that somebody who is mentally healthy, they should have a good thoughts, positive thoughts, they should feel good, or in terms of their emotions, they should have positive emotions, and they should have positive actions or behavior. Now, a disorder is whereby somebody has problems in terms of their thoughts, they're not thinking right, or some mental health disorders would affect somebody's feelings or emotions. For instance, anxiety, for instance, it will make somebody to have a situation where they will just feel fear of unknown. They're just seated quiet, then all of a sudden they are starting to panic. They're having fear when there's nothing to trigger the fear. So that's a negative feelings. Then we have negative actions or behavior, which is now to do with destructive behaviors and a few other mental health affect such. So when we talk of disorder, we are looking at, as I've said, a situation whereby somebody's thoughts, somebody's feelings or emotions, and somebody's actions or behaviors are not what is expected of that society. It means that person has diverted, has moved from the normal, from the order. That's why it's called a disorder, moving away from the order. So I thought I should clarify that from the onset, because people usually confuse the two. When they hear of mental health, what that comes into their mind is misala, which is not even the case. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. You've really explained what it is all about when we say mental healthy. And I know by now people will be able to differentiate between mental healthy and mental disorder. This takes us to another question. What are the symptoms and warning signs of mental healthy conditions?
Maybe it's just a matter of expounding, because when I mentioned of these three pillars of thoughts, feelings, actions, and I mentioned that some disorders affect these. For instance, if anything, we're talking of a change as warning signs, a change in somebody's thinking pattern, a change in somebody's feelings or emotions, a change in somebody's actions and behaviors. Let's say, for instance, depression. There are two commonest mental health disorders that people should know at the end of this podcast. These are depression and anxiety. Now, let's start with depression. With depression, it affects one's thoughts, whereby if somebody is depressed, they'll be having strange thoughts, strange thinking patterns, which is not in keeping with what we expect a normal Malawian young man should think or young woman should think. They would be mostly negative in terms of their thoughts. For instance, you haven't greeted them because maybe you did not see them. To them, that's an issue. They did not greet me, they hate me. Things of that nature, whereby their thoughts, line of thought is quite completely changed. You tend to want to say, how could this person think like this? So I may not, in the interest of time, I may not dwell much into the details of each disorder and what have you, but I'm just giving like the general overview of how mental health disorders present. For depression, we've spoken about how thoughts are changed. Usually somebody will have negative thoughts. When we say negative thoughts, it simply means that thoughts that are not good, thinking of committing suicide, thinking of things that happened in the past and the person still remembers them, thinking of that people don't like them, but people don't like them, thinking evil. Now when you talk about see under depression, some would also have symptoms that are to do with let's say actions or behavior. So for instance, one of the commonest that I can think of is isolation. Usually people who are depressed, especially young people, they would withdraw themselves. So for instance, this was a jovial young person. All of a sudden they are withdrawing. They are not still I will just be moving back and forth in terms of the thoughts and the actions or even the feelings. So loss of concentration, feeling guilty, feeling hopelessness, loss of energy. This is quite important. Actually, depression has 3 key symptoms plus other extra symptoms. So I should mention these 3 key symptoms. One, there is loss of energy, where somebody would just be feeling low in terms of their psychological energy, goes even to physical energy, whereby they will have slept the whole night, waking up so weak and tired. This is why sometimes if somebody is going through a depressive episode, people label them as lazy, this person is lazy, because they have lost energy. How would you expect somebody with low energy to be active, to be working and what not? Another key symptom of depression is loss of interest in things that you used to enjoy doing. So for instance, you used to enjoy doing maybe your hobbies, then all of a sudden you've lost all that interest. You've lost interest in school, you've lost interest in marriage, you've lost interest. So literally somebody loses interest in almost all the important things that matter to their life. Then another last key symptom is now sadness, which is a key defining symptom of depression. Usually somebody will just be sad. Once in a while we are usually sad. Even for our listeners, I don't know what time they'll be listening to this podcast, but assuming they are listening it maybe even 2 hours after waking up, within that 2 hours you have had something that may have made you sad, but you quickly pick up and keep moving. But with the sadness of depression, it's not just the usual sadness where it's after 5 minutes, this is a sadness that is prolonged, it's ongoing, it's getting worse, it's associated with the other symptoms. Feel life is meaningless, you lose concentration, you lose memory, you lose attention, and so on and so forth. So that is depression. Now in terms of, let's say, anxiety, for instance, the pattern is still the same. For anxiety, you are looking at a situation whereby somebody will just have fear of unknown. Usually anxiety is mostly dealing with feelings or emotions. So somebody would have heart palpitation, the heart will just be beating fast, breathlessness, sometimes you have a panic attacks. They will just have perceiving that something is about to go wrong. Something might go wrong, something bad is about to happen. They just have this constant fear without even any evidence. Okay, so usually anxiety usually affects thoughts, affects feelings, and sometimes it can even also affect actions or behavior. So in brief, I think symptoms of mental health problems would be looked at in terms of these 3 ways.
Having looked at the symptoms and warning signs of mental health disorders, now what are the treatment options for mental health disorders?
There are different treatment modalities for different mental health conditions. So what determines which treatment methodology one should get depends one on the condition, the type of mental health disorder that they have, but also most importantly the severity, that is the seriousness. Because let's say for instance for anxiety, for depression, it's classified into three dimensions: mild, moderate, severe. So for instance, as I've said, depression it's classified into mild, moderate and severe. For mild and sometimes moderate, just psychotherapy, that is counseling, it's just enough. But when it comes to moderate to severe cases, then apart from the counseling or the psychotherapy, one also needs to be subjected to medication. And this is a question that I usually almost always get from people who would ask me to say, does depression have medication? Yeah, there treatment. Is there medication for depression? The answer is yes, and a big yes. But it's not like everybody who is sad, then boom, medication for depression. So it's not like everybody who has depression, then boom, medication for depression. No, it depends on the severity. But sometimes somebody may have had mild depression which has been prolonged for years. Comes goes. You treat them with psychotherapy, comes goes. So in such moments, a certified prescriber would now think of maybe to add in an antidepressant, that is medication for depression. But as I've said, when we are dealing with mental health, almost all the mental health disorders that are out there, we use three different modalities. Because these three different modalities, it's what also help us to diagnose mental health disorders. So in terms of even what causes what, for instance, depression could be caused by psychological issues, could be caused by social issues, could be caused by medical issues. So in terms of treatment, the same also applies. Depending on severity, as I've said, sometimes biological may need to give medication. Then maybe for instance the person has depression because they're in college, they are not able to pay fees, they are not eating, they are coming from a poor background. Yes, you can give them medication. Yes, you can give them counseling or psychotherapy. But would that solve the problem? No. It means you need to have social interventions. So this is why we approach it. It's not like malaria where everybody go home. No. For mental health disorders, we look at case by case. So two people have depression, you find that the way they'll be managed will be completely different because you look at what is causing this depression. The depression that is being caused by, say, marital issues, relationship issues. Yes, you can provide medication if they are severe. A certified prescriber may prescribe medication. Yes, you might give psychological interventions, counseling, psychotherapy, different interventions. But would that really solve the problem? No, you need to add on some social skills, some social interventions.
What is the difference between therapy and counseling?
I'll tell you this, quite an important question, because oftentimes we loosely use these words interchangeably, but they're quite different. Counseling, anybody can provide counseling, as long as the person has skills. Because sometimes people can have inborn skills to provide counseling. Counseling is more or less like talking, providing guidance. What if you do this? What if you do this? That's counseling. But now when it comes to psychotherapy, it's now scientific. It needs somebody who is well trained, because there are different types of psychotherapy depending on the conditions and what the person is going through. I'll give an example. There is what is known as cognitive behavioral therapy. There is cognitive therapy, then there's behavioral therapy, then there is activity scheduling, then there is behavioral activation, then there is psychoanalysis, So they're quite different. So these, I mean, you cannot know them unless you have the skills, the training, the right training, as well as the right skills, which obviously there's a science behind it. It's not just a matter of just waking up and say I'll provide psychotherapy. So they're quite different. Though sometimes we'll use them loosely. This is why sometimes if somebody has been counseled maybe at church, maybe by another counselor at a lower level, but they feel like maybe this person hasn't gotten well, it means this person needs now advanced therapy. So they're different.
I don't know how to go about our situation. Familiar with openness in our conversation. I've experienced these casualties, built these walls of the tragedy. Thinking if they get high enough, no one needs to save me. Now I know vulnerability has its limitations. If I'm showing you everything, I hope you embrace it. Cause I don't do that usually. I'm prepared for the scrutiny. Thinking if you get used to me, you'll be on your way. So I guess you must be on your way then. No one's ever gave me any patience. Don't know how to love, need demonstration. Who's there to clean me up when you're gone? I think I made a mess. Who's there to clear my mind? You're not around, you're so unimpressed with me. I don't wanna do too much. 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 I can find you, will never lie to you. Say you want my shit, from this point of view. I don't wanna think too much, you judging me. I don't wanna think too much, but you can't believe. I don't wanna lose control. I don't wanna let you go. I don't wanna let you go. Happens all the time. I don't wanna let you go. I don't wanna let you go. You fly for me, fly for me. Never hide me, slap me. You gotta say too much, cause I'm trusting you, baby. You gotta say too much, cause it's all on you, baby. You've been on my mind, I don't know what to do. Happens all the time, I don't know what to do. Who's there to clean me up when you're gone? I think I made a mess. Who's there to clear my mind? You're not around and you're so unimpressed with me. Who's there to pick me up and you're no longer answering your phone? Who's there to clean me up? Who's there when I'm all alone? When I'm all alone, when I'm all alone,
I want you to discuss the importance of self-care and stress management in maintaining mental disorders.
You cannot overemphasize the importance of self-care, because as you have said, it's quite important in terms of our mental health. We wake up, as human beings, we are in two layers. Should I say layers or two parts? I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but we are into two something. There's a body, the physical body, and there's a mind. This is why we have physical health, then we have mental health. For physical health, it's what we usually give attention to, because maybe we can see it physically, you can see the body. This is why we eat, we sleep well, we eat well, we exercise, we drink water, or whatever we do, we are caring for this body. But oftentimes we forget about our mental health. So I'm just giving this background just to illustrate the importance of self-care, because what makes us to care for our bodies, to go to the gym, to eat fruits, to eat well. It's because we want to have a healthy physical body. But when it comes to the mind, it's like we are loose. We don't know how to take care of it. Eventually, people have mental health issues, have depression, have prolonged stress. And actually, it's this stress, either from work, from school, from whatever, it's prolonged. It's been there for some time. It eventually will lead to depression. It will lead to serious anxiety disorders, personality issues, and so on and so forth. Some people may have had traumatizing events without taking care of themselves. Then eventually, they are making even things worse. So the most important thing is for people to take care of themselves, to take care of their mind. I will not give much tips about self-care because for this one I have special training workshops that I provide for that, so I wouldn't want to exhaust everything. But one of the things that I would say in general about self-care is to look at it back to the three things that we mentioned: thoughts, feelings, actions, or behaviors. Now, there are self-care interventions that are to do with your thoughts. How can you control your thoughts? How can you ensure that you have positive thoughts? Feelings. How do you control your feelings and emotions? How do you manage your feelings and emotions? How do you make sure that you have you are the center of your emotions? Your emotions don't control you, you control your emotions. Then we go to actions and behaviors. On this, we can also talk about issues like addictions. How do you manage addictions? How do you manage your behaviors? Because remember, it's something that you do over and over, an activity, an action. Doing it over and over, it becomes a habit. You do it over and over, that habit becomes a behavior. That behavior, you do it over and over, it becomes your personality. It's what would define you. So all these, there are different strategies through which one can be able to maneuver around and control themselves, their mental health. So as I've said, I'm sorry for this one. I'll not give it for free.
Okay.
But I think I've given hints.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Before we conclude everything, I want you to give us your last words.
Well, my last words is that I wish whatever we do, especially deal with colleagues in the media often, but the more we interact, the more expectations that we have about, in terms of creating awareness. Because one of the strategies that have been seen to be effective in as far as promoting mental health is awareness. Because some people are going through a lot because they don't know where to go and what have you. They don't know whatever they're going through, it's a medical condition and there is help. So my wish to colleagues in the media fraternity is that I think it should go beyond podcasts. It should go beyond documentaries or whatever you do. There should be the practical side about it. Because you know what, this is a podcast, it will be online, and I'm sure those listening obviously have access to data. But we have a certain young girl somewhere in Cholo, somewhere in Zimba, somewhere in Sanje, somewhere in Zomba Jali, who would have loved to have this information that I've shared readily available to them. Not even in English, even in their local language, in Chichewa, in Sena, in Yao, in Tumbuka. Who's going to find them? So we should go beyond theoretical work into practical work to say, okay, what do we do? Can we try to translate this podcast into the other languages? Can we try to make this as available as possible? Can we try to share it either on social media, not just on Spotify, so that it should reach whoever it can reach. Perhaps, you know what, I mean, it's simple things like this through which life has been saved. We've saved life through simple things like this. So this is a tool. If used well, I don't know how many lives would be saved, because it could reach somebody who is depressed right now, who didn't know that they're depressed. They just thought, what is happening with me? Now they meet information like this, which is direct, exactly explaining what they are feeling. To them, even if you don't do anything, just giving them, letting them know that this is something that happens. Actually, 1 in every 4 to 5 young people have depression. Just that information on its own, it sort of like gives hope. It's okay, I'm not alone. So this is a medical condition where I can go and seek help. So you are trying to give hope. So this hope should not end on Spotify, should not end on the internet. It should reach those without access to the internet. That's what I can say.
Thank you so much.